Alright, so here we go. As we talked about in the overview, we're going to go ahead and take a look real quick at what we're going to do. Here's step 405, and I'm just going to clear the cache and hop in here. And we decreased the time for the loader bar just so that we can get through that step faster as we're refreshing and testing. And what we can see is we're now missing the quotes. We're not pulling them into the menu anymore. We're actually replacing them with a object in the appData object. We added the side menus that we want, and for now they're posts and pages. And what we're doing is when we click on a post, we actually reach out to, we can see we reach out to our WordPress website, and we grab our pages and posts, and if we go and we reach out and we grab our pages, we see that we do another request. It brings those pages back and puts them in a list. Later we'll have it that we can actually drag and drop and reorder them and edit them. When we click on them, the edit will come in step 406. For now, we're just getting the content into our site. So awesome. So now let's go ahead and let's move to localhost and let's see what all we have going on here. The first thing that we want to do is we're going to go ahead and use an Ajax file from sample site, and we want to use that because we're not going to write it out. We're going to pay attention and learn Ajax as we use it rather than write it all out clearly. And so the best thing we can do right now is just get it going. So if you could do this in the homework as well. You could go into homework and you could click on ajax.js, and that'll take you right to this file, and you could copy and paste that. Or you can just go to our sample site. Keep hopping around here. Go to our sample site and say view page source and click on ajax.js, and then do a save and actually save the file the way that we want it. And we're going to go into our 4xx assets.js, and we're going to save that right in there. So at this point we should be able to return to our Dreamweaver and see that has made its way in there, which it has. Excellent. So then, of course, the next thing that we want to do is we want to pull that file into our index.html so that we're able to process the file when we load the page. And we're going to put it after our app.js. And the reason we're going to do that is we just, these are all functions, and we'll take a look at this file in a minute, and we'll see that these are all just functions that we're going to use. And so let's open that up and take a look in here. What we're doing here is we're creating an object, and then we're attaching events basically to it. We're saying, x, ajax.x, and what we're doing in here is we're building an XML HTTP request object, which we've learned about in this lesson. So I'm not going to go too deep into this, but you'll see we've actually addressed the old school issues as well by making sure that if the version is ideally really actually at this point IE6, IE7, that uses ActiveX object instead of XML HTTP request. And so we'll build that object out of ActiveX rather than the HTTP request object. We have a couple functions that we throw in here that we go ahead and we are going to use, and the post we're not going to do right now, but our get essentially is building our parameters that we want to pass along, and it's actually making the call is coming up here on send. So we're actually building this object from these functions, which we'll learn more and more about, and it'll make more sense as we move along. So for now, let's go ahead and let's save we have our Ajax file there. We have our HTML. So let's just go out and be good developers and just test for errors. We want to make sure that we don't have any errors coming through. And so far so good. Fingers crossed here. And we are awesome. Good. So now that we've done that, we want to get some items over here so that we can click on them and call the Ajax items, the Ajax calls, and get our pages and our posts. So let's go ahead and the first thing we want to do is work on just replacing our side menu and get the right things that we want in there. And what we're going to do is we're going to extend our appData object and use that as our menu to get the information that we want for our menu. And the reason we're going to do this is because it's basically like a configuration file. It's in the top, and we're just adding in one more parameter with an array. We just learned about arrays, and that array is just going to have two things in it right now, posts and pages. So we'll go ahead and we'll hit save for that. And then we're going to scroll on down. And while we're in here, let's go ahead and let's do our display. Let's go ahead and knock that time down a little so that we're not waiting as long. And let's just change it to 15 so we see it. We have enough to see it. And let's hit save. And all that's going to do is speed up that menu, that loader bar when it's loading, so that we're not waiting as long. So we'll come down here to menuBuilder, and we can see that what it's doing right now is it's depending on that array, that quotes array, because that's how we were building it at the time. And so what we wanted to go after is our appData.sideMenu. So if we were to type in appData.side, you can see it pops up there, and we want this to be a length because we're looking for how many items are in it so that we can do our loop through it. And so that should take care of that. And then what we want to do at this point is, instead of going after the quote items, what we want to go after here is, we'll go ahead, we'll clean this up right here, clean this up right here, use a little feature, we'll hold down the control button, and we'll just get our cursor in two places. And by doing that, what we can do is we can type in both places at the same time, and we're going after appData.sideMenu, and then we're going after the current item, so we would actually put that I inside of there, which is cool. And that's really all we have to do to get the menu to work the way that we want it to pull those two items up here and use them down in the code here. So if we save and we go out and we take a look, we do a refresh, went a lot faster because we changed that, and we can see that now we have our items over here. And so our next thing is that our onClick function is obviously not very happy about us clicking on these items. So let's go and address that. The way that we'll address that is, if you look in here at our linkClicked function, right now all we're doing is really just throwing in a console log and then a variable, and then populating the main with that content inside the variable. And we pretty much want to use a lot of this, but at this point what we really want to do is we want to go ahead and we want to loop through the items from above. And in worst case scenario, we want to be able to manage that as well if something is not going right. So let's go ahead and let's get our code in here, and then we'll talk about it. I'm going to go ahead and replace the linkClicked function. And you'll see what I've done is basically I've said if appData.sideMenu includes dataset.dest. So what that's looking for is dataset destination. So that's something that we are looking at as far as for the ID, just like we were doing earlier. Then what we want to do is say, go ahead, use Ajax, call out to our site, and get dataset destination. Well, if you notice, dataset destination is basically the same thing that the menu item is. And so up here we have posts and pages. And we use them for our title and our destination because we know that dest is going to be passed down into the link clicked. And when it's passed down into the link clicked, we can use this same Ajax function for posts and pages because we know that our API call goes v2 and then either posts or pages, among other things. But right now we're focused on posts and pages. And then we're saying else. Just to pick up that quote array, just in case something happens. For now, we'll get rid of this eventually, but else var string and pick up that quote in case we have any trailers. And so we'll go ahead and we're going to save that, and we're going to go out and take a look now, do a refresh, submit. And we can see that it brought in our pages and that it brought in our posts, which is pretty cool stuff. The way that the grid is coming up on the page, let's talk about that. We can see that the Ajax calls are being made. We can see that they're returning the data that we wanted. As far as pages go, there's obviously more pages, and we have it set per page to 50. So we'll actually eventually put a little pagination link down here to say to load the next 50. Or how do we end up with this? We know that the call went out and it did the JSON call, brought the data back. And so what happened with that data that it resulted looking the way that it did? Well, the reason that came back the way that it did is what we're doing is we're using something called a callback function, which we've read about in our readings about XML HTTP requests. And that callback function is really, that's just saying to do another function. And what we've done inside of our ajax.js is we've tucked away this function down here called useData. And so when it brings the data back, it comes in through here, it passes that request object that came back, and we bring it in and we parse it as JSON. We're basically breaking it apart. It's a string when it comes in, and then we're breaking it apart into JSON. And then we create this variable called data table, and all we're doing is we're creating the top of a table, and down here you'll see we close off the body in the table, just straight HTML, and then we're putting our rows in. And we're using that data object that came back for each one inside it. We're just doing another loop, and we're going through and we're pulling out those pieces of information that are coming in from the JSON object. Excellent. So at this point, we can go ahead and we have our index.html is all good, and we'll take a look in here one more time. Let's go out and check our site one more time. We have a pretty big gap there, so let's go ahead and let's just address that real quick in our CSS. So if we go to our CSS file, we know that the contStage is there, and we're going to reduce that 180 to 80 because what that's going to do is close up the gap for us. And when we do that, we're also going to go ahead and actually I think we're good at this point. Let's try that out. So let's go out to our local host. Let's do a refresh. Put on our console, make sure we're not. And we'll take care of a loader later. We can see now that this is bringing this back over, which is excellent. And it's looking pretty good in our page. All right, excellent. So at this point, I want to check one other thing in here just to make sure that I'm happy with. And let's bring this down to 100. And see what happens. Minimum width of 100, that's the side UL elements because of how far they spread apart. I'd like to close that gap a little, but we're developers and we don't want to, so it left a huge gap there. So I think we're going to go and undo that. And we're going to leave that at 160. And we'll take care of visual later Sometimes you want to play with it, a little bit and see if you can do something right out of the gate. But in the end, you don't want to spend too much time focused on how things look and what you're doing with them. So to recap, we added the Ajax file. The Ajax file has a bunch of functions in it that we're exploring in our lessons in the reading material for this lesson, and we can see that we have our ajax.js calling in, and our ajax.js is really just our object, building our Ajax object. So if you're familiar with jQuery, a couple lines cover all of that. And then we have our useData function where we're going to loop through and we're going to create a table and throw that table into the main content of the page from the elements that are returned from the Ajax call. We came in and we took care of our linked object. We'll leave this here for now, just probably get rid of it sooner or later, but just to keep things clean. And we added in the functionality for receiving a link clicked from the side menu, where we can see that we've built those items, those list items, out of our appData.sideMenu data object. So at this point, we're good to go, and our next step, we can go ahead and we can do our get status, and we can see that we added our file and we have some changes. So we'll do get add dot, another get status. We see we got everything there, so we'll do get commit message, and we added menu items to complete Ajax calls to pull posts and pages from our WP me site. And there we go. So at this point we are good, and in our next video we'll go ahead and we'll do our push and our merge. So I will see you in the next video.